Greetings, church. My name is Suzanne. I'm going to be walking alongside you during this sabbatical season, and today I'm coming to you from my home office in Fort Worth, Texas, where it is colder today than it is in Moscow. It's a strange time that we're living in, and maybe you have a similar journey right now. Maybe you're at your house and there's chaos, there's kids, there's phone calls, there's text. It's just a different way to be. But God is meeting us here in this moment as we begin our Lenten season today, and we open all of our whole beings, our eyes, our ears, our hearts, our minds, to be one with God on this journey. It is kind of the point of our story today. But before I jump into the gospel, you know that few stories in the Old Testament are as gruesome as that of the man stoned to death for picking up sticks on the Sabbath. The narrative's outline is clear, but the severity of the sentence, it's definitely not. We find this account and the documented killing in the Bible for Sabbath breaking in Numbers chapter 15. It is an eerie story. Our hapless protagonist is aptly nameless, for he is every man. With very little elaboration, the writer sums up this man's entire life in a single paragraph. He went gathering sticks on the Sabbath, and his fellow wilderness sojourners arrested and put him in the stockade. Later, they took him before Aaron and Moses. You remember them, right? And eventually the entire congregation was there to be witness. And we learned the reason for this dallying. It had not been explained what should be done to him. So they are waiting and they're pondering and they're thinking what to do. And there is this clear sense that at first, not only to the assembled throng, but also to Aaron and Moses, that they had not done this before. That might explain why God intervened in that moment and took the punishment decision away from Moses and declared that this man must be put to death. And with this statement, God bound everyone to a death command in that moment. The responsibility for killing him would be communal, for you see, all that were present in that moment should pick up stones and with deliberate aim hurl it at the offender, their neighbor, their friend, their loved one, until he died, and they all obeyed. I have to admit, this is one of those biblical narratives that makes my soul feel rubbed over with sandpaper. It is in the nature of rules to take a life on of their own, isn't it? Sooner or later, they have a way of sapping joy, of making people and their needs disappear from sight. And Jesus comes along in our scripture today and becomes a Sabbath breaker, much like that stick gathering man. Not only from the rules laid down way back in Numbers, but also in the eyes of the religious keepers of tradition in Jesus' own time. Guess what, church? That's us. And what concerns the Pharisees instead is the fact that Jesus and his companions are traveling and gleaning on the Sabbath. They should have stayed put. They should have prepared their snacks on the previous day, right? They should have, but they didn't. And to the Pharisees, this behavior appears to deliberately neglect the mandate to observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. That is their intention. But Jesus sees a larger story at work. Jesus wants us to begin with God, with creation, and with each other. Jesus wants us to begin with love, as he made clear that day in the synagogue. Eugene Peterson was an English professor and paraphrased the Bible, one of my favorite paraphrases that's still around today. And he once observed that when you think about it based on the Genesis account of creation and God's plan, Adam and Eve's very first day of existence was a Sabbath. Humanity began with the proverbial day off, it seems. Remember? We were created on the sixth day to be steward keepers of all that had been created, and then God took a day off, which means humanity had a day off. The human race started its existence on a Sabbath as a reminder of the very reason for which God created us in the first place. God made us for love and in love. And when love for God and for one another sets the Sabbath tone, most of what nettled the Pharisees and all of what led them to plot Jesus' murder in the end would probably disappear. Let's backtrack for a moment, shall we? Let's reacquaint ourselves with the genesis of the Sabbath law found in Exodus 20. You see, the commandment expresses two main thoughts. The first revolves around the sanctity of the day. God pronounced the day holy, pronounced the day sacred, blessed, because on this day God rested from labor. So from sundown to sundown on the Sabbath day, God bids us to refrain from all recreational activities. And again, the emphasis is on the sacredness of the day, which is why we would argue another day cannot be substituted, right? That rhythm, that Sabbath is important. However, the day's specialness is not discernible. There is nothing demonstrably unique about this day in comparison to the other 6 days. The sun shines, the rain falls, in my case, the ice falls, the flowers bloom in equal measure on Sabbath as on any of the other days of the week. And natural disasters and earthquakes and tsunamis and wildfires and snowstorms don't pause to observe Sabbaths. If you woke up from a long coma and weren't reoriented to which day it was, you couldn't tell the difference. Albert Einstein's greatest insight, as far as I'm concerned, was likely the one that involved time. Before Einstein, people assumed that whatever time is, it is constant. Time marches on, the old saying goes. And before Einstein, we assumed that time marches ever and always at the same pace. It does not matter who you are or where you are or what you are doing. You cannot affect time. If your battery is running low on your phone and your watch slows down or your phone dies, the actual time that passes around you didn't speed up and it didn't slow down. It just was. But Einstein realized that time is truly an existing dimension. Time is as real as the wood of a tree trunk, and it is not constant. Time is affected by motion and position. Stay with me, church. You see, time is relative. Einstein's classic illustration has to do with the train. You know this story, right? Picture yourself riding on a train. Picture another person sitting on a bench alongside the train tracks, watching the train go by. And now imagine that 2 bolts of lightning strike the train tracks, one just behind the moving train and one just ahead of the train. And to the person sitting on the bench, it is clear that these 2 bolts of lightning struck the tracks at the exact same instant. They were simultaneous, but the person riding 60 miles per hour on the train would not perceive it that way. You see, if you were riding on the train, you would see the bolt of lightning ahead of the train before the one behind the train. At one time, it was thought that this could be explained the same way you deal with sound waves. If you're in your car waiting for a train to pass, you hear the crossing bell go ding, 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 always the same tone, but people on the train don't hear it that way. And as you move toward the bell and then away from it, the pitch changes. First higher as you approach the bell, and the sound waves scrunch up as you move toward them, and then lower as you pass by as the sound waves elongate behind you. So perhaps the same thing happens with lightning. You just get to the light waves of one bolt quicker since you're moving toward it and away from the other one. But it doesn't work that way. The phenomenal insight of Einstein was that you cannot explain this difference in perception by fiddling with the speed of light because the speed of light is constant. Light always goes the same speed. You cannot get light to come to you any faster. So Einstein realized that what accounts for the person on the train seeing the light bolts differently than the person on the bench is that time is different for the person on the train. Time is relative. It can be affected by motion. And scientists have even discovered it if you take 2 very sensitive nuclear clocks, synchronize the time of both, and then place one at the top of a skyscraper and one at the bottom, and then let them tick away for a few days. It turns out that the clock on the bottom runs slower because it's closer to the Earth's center of gravity than the one at the top, which moves faster as the Earth rotates. Science is cool. Well, it took an Einstein to figure that all out. But there is a sense in which the importance and the impact of time is something our Jewish families and Christians have known all along, right? The Bible itself lets us know that time can affect us, but also that we can affect the time around us. That's why there's such a thing as Sabbath. God took care to weave Sabbath rest right into the richly embroidered tapestry of creation. And as such, Sabbath is not just a human technique for stress reduction. It is a way to take hold of time and make it serve the cosmic purpose of glorifying God by paying attention to the rhythms that God instituted. So how ironic that the Pharisees, the religious elite, those that were keeping the law of worship, knew enough about Jesus that he could not resist healing, and yet they did not really understand the fundamental nature of Jesus and this notion I just explained of Sabbath time. They knew that Jesus was fundamentally compassionate, good, and gentle enough that he would not pass by a sorry figure like this man, and so they exploited that goodness so as to trip him up according to the religious system of rules and regulations. Today we're talking about the week of compassion in our offering. We want to be those compassionate souls in the way of Jesus Christ. And since the Pharisees could not be moved by Jesus' compassion, they used it against him, this Sabbath breaking. But that's just why it's important to be that kind of Sabbath breaker, church. You know, for the last week, our sub-zero temperatures have beaten even Anchorage, Alaska, and Russia, as I indicated earlier. We've had to reconfigure where I am in Texas our work week as we stayed home, even beyond our normal COVID regimen. And as I was thinking about how Jesus interacted with time and rituals and law and people differently than what we thought we always knew or thought it should be, it occurred to me that there are snow days and there are well days. And these can be our ways of breaking open the Sabbath in our postmodern world. And that snow days and well days are where we need to begin on our Lenten journey this season. You know, blizzard-like conditions, over 7 inches of snow, 2 inches of ice, more ice on its way. In a place that doesn't get snow meant everything was shut down. We don't have a way to clear the roads. There were blocked streets and darkened schools and shuttered businesses, and no one went anywhere. And then all of a sudden, I heard gleeful screams of delight as my driveway on my hill was the popular place to be for the young and the old, who were strolling and sledding down my driveway, building snowmen in my front yard, and laying down snow angels. There was laughter everywhere. And maybe first, looking out on the expanse of whiteness, it was gorgeous, but then I had a little panic moment. You know what I'm talking about, church, right? Because I might have been supposed to be at a meeting across town. Maybe it's similar for you in Kentucky. You're a trustee. You got business to do at a certain hour on a certain day, and then the reality hits you. This meeting, by divine decree and whimsy, is canceled. The whole day is yours. The whole day is not business as usual. Now consider this. You get 52 of these a year. Sabbath days. Think of them as snow days. The gift of an entire day that is all yours for anything but the business as usual. That's the first way to interact in this Sabbath season, church, and as we journey into Lent. But then there's also the notion of a well day. Not a sick day, mind you, a well day. We call in sick when we're writhing with stomach flu or fever, we're coughing like crazy, we're lacking the strength to stand, we would be useless at our job, and besides, we're likely little viral magnets, and we would be a pox upon all of our colleagues in their houses, right? So we take a sick day. But some days, don't you just wake up so filled with life and strength and curiosity that you don't want to waste it on work? So it's time for a well day. Sitting by a fire, reading a book just for fun. Wandering museums, lingering over a long lunch with a loved one. This too is Sabbath making. Intentional time to help you feel and live with life. Remember, Sabbath is God's gift to make you look, feel, and live more redeemed. That's something we should never turn down. But for many among us, the snow day or the well day is hard to enact. What we do or we fail to do on Sabbath time is still fraught with all that guilt and that doubt. And that's why this consideration of Jesus' broader approach to behavioral issues is instructive for us today. Concerning Sabbath work, Jesus appears to bait the religious leaders, right? He defends the Sabbath behavior that was deemed unlawful and could even merit the death penalty. Remember, back to Numbers. And then in a switch, he uses the occasion to explain why the Sabbath was never intended as a shooting gallery for vigilantes. You see, Jesus' new interpretive approach of being a Sabbath breaker impacts the law of the Sabbath violation and the God-sanctioned killing of the man who gathered sticks. Whatever its implication might be for us in this moment, it should no longer be argued that the man's gruesome killing over sticks served a deterrence in the light of Jesus' explanation. You see, by liberalizing the Sabbath law, Jesus allows us all to breathe easier in our chaos. We can exhale because the law that promised Sabbath rest had devolved into an oppressive burden of rules that we carry around our necks every Sabbath. It's not supposed to be that way. Jesus became a Sabbath breaker, and that is our invitation today as we begin Lent and this year of sabbatical replenishment. So church, take a snow day, take a well day, take an hour or a moment, but take one and go the way of Jesus. What will you do this season, church? Will you breathe? Will you eat better and more mindfully? Will you explore the depths of your soul or declutter your manic meeting schedule? You see, each intentional act becomes the pattern of Sabbath making and tending and being, and we do it individually, and the benefits become vast for our community because as a community, we say we are about life over death. That's the kind of Sabbath breaker I'm inviting you to be with me, church, over these next few months, and that's the kind of Sabbath breaker I want to be. May God hold our feet to the journey of Sabbath. Amen.